Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington with breaking news from the White House that could have major national security implications. President Trump announced General H.R. McMaster is leaving his role as National Security Advisor. He's out. He will be replaced by John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. What that means for the direction of the country's national security policy is clear. McMaster was a moderating force in the White House who urged the president not to rip up the nuclear deal with Iran. Bolton is a hardliner who has called the deal with Iran the biggest single act of appeasement by the West since Munich. In the past, he's even called for bombing Iran. I'm joined right now by NBC News' Vivian Salama, and, of course, move that back, please, Julia Ainsley, former State Department official, Nayyera hack, and retired General Barry McCaffrey. I think you all four are going to be as stunned as I am by the news. I don't know whether this is wag the dog, is this to get away from Stormy Daniels and the whole rest of this hell, or what, but to bring in the biggest neocon in the world, the one who so many millions of voters voted against in 2016, who voted against stupid wars, and bring in the biggest hawk there's ever been, and put him as head of national security is awful. And I don't know anybody disagrees with that who thinks. Your thoughts?
Well, you just said the word hawk. That is exactly what John Bolton is. He is no stranger to
He likes war. He has wanted for war with Iraq. He pushed and pushed and pushed. He wanted to go to war with Syria. Name the country in the Middle East he didn't want to go to war with.
Well, one of the issues...
And he wants war now with Iran.
One of the issues that he is particularly devout about is getting this nuclear deal with Iran to just
so that he can do what he wants to do, which is bomb.
He wants to scrap it.
He has said, I want to bomb.
He is very, very skeptical about the Iranian
that's the way
regime.
You're putting it. Let's go to the alternative.
Exactly
Carol, his alternative plan has been, he's written about it extensively, bomb.
You're talking about his Iran, but I mean, what we're seeing is a president who is going away from people who are giving him that moderating voice of reason because he doesn't want to hear it anymore. He doesn't want to hear it on the Iran nuclear deal. He doesn't want to hear it with his own defense against Robert Mueller. And we saw that today with the resignation of John Dowd. This is a pattern that we're seeing play out, Chris, as the president wants to surround himself with people who are pugnacious, who are going to be dogged, and who will tell him more of what he wants to hear. I think Vivian knows a lot about his relationship with H.R. McMaster and how he wanted to get away from someone who was that voice of reason.
Let me bring Nayyera because, you know, the record's pretty straight now that we've spent trillions of dollars in the war with Iran, with Iraq, and, of course, with Afghanistan. And this fellow, having supported both those wars, now supports this war. He made it clear in an article, I just read it a few moments ago, there's still time to bomb Iran. He wrote that in 2015. He's an all-out neocon hawk. And that's the kind of advice this president now wants.
If you like the war in Iraq, you're going to love the one that John Bolton's going to declare and push for in Iraq. And let's not forget North Korea, too, where we have another volatile leader that Donald Trump recently committed to meeting face-to-face. Listen, when John Bolton was at the United Nations, he was the architect for reducing U.S. involvement in the international community. He has actually said there is no United Nations. There is barely an international community that the United States can lead. Unfortunately, in this era of Donald Trump's America First, we're talking about America alone, an America that is not interested in working on international agreements and diplomatic resolutions to any of the challenges facing the world. And with John Bolton and his tenure at the UN, in which he essentially pulled back United States involvement, we're going to be looking at the United States going at it alone once again.
General McCaffrey, I think I dare to say that a lot of people in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, working guys and working women voted for Trump because they thought he would stop stupid wars, because they're the kids. Their kids are the ones who fight these wars. And now he brings in Bolton, for whom war is like a philosophy. And you know who this guy is. And to put him in charge, is this to distract attention from the mishigas and hell that's affecting the guy personally and the legal threats the president faces and the possibility of impeachment? Is this to be wagging the dog? Is this what he's doing now, Trump?
No, I think he now thinks he's in charge. So I think the president is rearranging the landscape. Bolton, by the way, is extremely intelligent, very experienced, writes beautifully, and is probably the most hard-edged person in 25 years in foreign policy. He's replacing a guy, H.R. McMaster, by the way, who had a lot of experience on the ground as a troop commander in combat. So H.R. and most of the soldiers don't want to fight. They know what it's going to look like. So I do think this is a extremely momentous turning point in the way we can expect the White House to respond to foreign policy issues.
And Chris,
go ahead, jump in.
Chris, this is exactly the problem we have with someone like John Bolton in charge of national security. This is the classic civilians and their ideas as war hawks of what works, overruling and overriding the generals. It's the problems that we saw in the Iraq War, and it's a problem we're going to be seeing coming out of the White House foreign policy going forward.
You know, we had these characters over in the State Department, Defense Department under W, and they pushed and pushed for war. They got a president of limited ability, W, not a bad man, but of limited ability. And people like Cheney and the people like Bolton got him into that war. 15 years we regretted that war. 15 years and lots of lost lives, not just American lives and people disfigured and losing limbs, but hundreds of thousands of people on the other side we have to consider who are dead now because of this. And what did we get? We lost the one buffer with Iran we had, Iraq. We had, we had a government, that was willing to fight them, that went to war with them. We had somebody between them and Israel, somebody between them and us. And now we're facing Iran. And this guy now, when he has his opportunity, wants to go. You know he does.
Well, I mean, almost to Julia's point earlier, where you have this individual who really speaks to the president's interests in terms of being really hawkish and tough in Iran, putting them in their place.
Sheldon Adelson wants a war.
Undoing what the Obama administration had done in Iran and being tougher on North Korea. These are things that John Bolton really speaks to and appeals to. Also important to note, John Bolton is a contributor for Fox News. This president happens to really be into a lot of the television commentators that he sees. A lot of people who he sees on television he regards as authorities. And it just so happens that John Bolton is a very intelligent person and does have a very long career in foreign policy. But he's someone that the president also sees on a daily basis on television at Fox News. And so he has always been on the president's mind. John Bolton was someone that the president spoke to during the transition and has repeatedly revisited for a post in this administration.
Okay, let's go back to Joy. Wasn't he kept out of the door for a long time by John Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, John Kelly is someone who was very much the doorkeeper, but we're starting to see that lessen a little bit.
He can't keep Bolton now. Bolton's now his colleague. He's head of national security. Not only is he in the door meeting the president today, he's now be calling the shots.
And what I just keep thinking of also are all the people who recently lost their security clearances, all the people who aren't in the room anymore. So that pool has gotten smaller. Even if people thought Jared Kushner should have never been getting the presidential daily briefing, he was a moderating voice, that he tried to keep the president kind of in a moderate line. That's one person less that will be in the room when he's being briefed by John Bolton.
What's it going to be like when we have a new coalition of Jared Kushner, a hawk, with Sheldon Adelson financing a lot of this mentality? You can tell he is. Bolton's one of his guys. And then you've got who else in this administration? Who's going to say no? Who's going to say no? Let's cool it here.
Well, a lot of the moderates have been, on the outs with this administration. We saw Gary Cohn, who's leaving.
Sure, he had common sense.
Exactly. McMaster, considered a moderate. You just said that. And a number of others. Tillerson, of course. And that was one of the big problems. The president last week, when he was letting Tillerson go, specifically cited his views on the Iran deal and said that that was just not going to work. They had very different views. And now you have someone like John Bolton who speaks to what the president really wants to do, which is shake things up, cancel the Iran nuclear deal, and get tough and crack down. We'll see what the limits are, or if there are limits, but they're going to crack down on Iran.
Let's go back to General. Go ahead, General McCaffrey.
You got to remember two things. One is the Congress of the United States. I think the people that are most concerned about this right now will be the Republican leadership in the Senate, who will be looking at the probable outcome of the foreign policy debate that will go on with Bolton in such a key position. The other factor to keep in mind is Secretary Jim Mattis, who's a defense intellectual, a very thoughtful, law-abiding man, who's also had a lot of machine gun rounds fired by his ears. So I think there's going to be a stabilizing coalition now between the Congress and the Department of Defense. Pompeo, probably being extremely intelligent, will be also wary of ending up in a disaster with foreign policy. So that's what we got to count on.
Who did you say was the moderating force besides Pompeo, General?
Well, Secretary Jim Mattis, Department of Defense. He's actually been under fire multiple times. he's not going to want to end up in a war with Iran. That would be simply the stupidest war we would ever engage in. But North Korea is the one to really watch, not Iran in the short run.
Let's talk about the war. Nayyera, I want you to come in here and just lead this discussion a bit. It seems to me that the world headlines are moving for tomorrow morning's papers in Germany and the rest of the world. They're going to be all the headline. I think, as somebody said a moment ago, hardliner is a pretty good way to describe it. So President Trump, unfortunately, President Trump names hardliner as national security chief. How's that going to sound around the world?
Well, look at the other hardliners that Donald Trump just met with this week, and specifically the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who was apparently talking back at home about how happy he was that Tillerson was now gone as a moderating force. The Saudis and the folks, the Emiratis and the UAE, are very excited about the idea of the United States taking a harder line towards Iran. So you're seeing their influence in the removal of General McMaster as well. Again, this is taking a very particular side in the Middle East region, a region rife with conflict where the U.S. has previously been a moderating and balancing force. This is not going to be in the long-term interest of our U.S. troops or the American public to be taking the Saudi foreign policy line.
So now, Vivian, we get rid of a Secretary of State known for being a moderating force who believes in climate change. He thinks we should honor it. He also believes we ought to honor this truce we had, this treaty we have with Iran, and try to forestall their nuclear ambitions. And we bring in getting rid of Tillerson. We get rid of him, we get rid of McMaster, and we bring in John Bolton. This is bringing in Tojo. This is unbelievable. I'm sorry. Sorry, General. Your memory's there. I'm telling you, it's really bringing in a guy who's on the opposite side of moderation.
Well, one of the issues since day one of this administration was the fact that President Trump himself was not very ideological. And so he came in and he had these advisors that were coming from all sides, all ends of the spectrum. And so it was very hard to get things done because he was literally getting opposing and conflicting advice from these advisors.
And now he's hearing from hawks.
Now we are starting to sort of funnel some of those people out, and a lot of the moderates are being left out of this process. They're being, pushed out the door, and you do have a lot more conservatives, a lot more hardliners in the administration. Okay. We saw with the China today, we just saw the, tough talk on China. It's the same thing all across the board.
Joey, let's talk possible crazy. Okay, the same day that his trade proposal cost the stock market over 700 points. It is getting scary. This is big time corrective. It's not corrective. It's a problem. He's creating himself, a self-created problem. The same day he fires his top lawyer, John Dowd, the same day he fires the national security advisor, basically pushes him out. What is he doing for? Total Michigas, total crazy in one day? Why does he want so much noise in one day?
This president has never followed the rule book that we see from other White Houses. Sometimes we'll start to hear, and we're sort of back in the previous administrations, we would hear rumors about a shakeup, and then we would wait until we knew when they would announce it because it would be on a day they wanted it to distract from something else. In this case, we're not sure which one Trump is distracting from in any given day. Maybe he doesn't want us to be talking about Stormy Daniels.
Just throwing all the toys in the air. I'm mad. I'm getting rid of everything. It is extraordinary. I'm sorry. I'm a little emotional about this because it is. I have never seen a president behave like this in one day. Vivian?
I mean, we knew that H.R. McMaster's days were numbered. We have reported here at NBC. This is not that necessarily that shocking.
You're the personal aspect of the president. On the same day that the market crashes 700 points because of a trade move, he fires his lawyer, and then he fires the national security advisor, all within a matter of minutes.
100%.
What's going on?
This is a president that knows how to control the media narrative, and that is something that we have seen time and time again, as Julia just said. And so he does. He plans a lot of these announcements very strategically.
He's got a headline now. It's called War Footing. The whole world's going to see it. You bring in John Bolton. Just take a look at that guy. Just put his picture on world newspapers. You don't have to say much more. Thank you, Vivian Salama. Thank you, Joy Ainsley, Nayyera Hackett, General McCaffrey. Coming up much more.